Which Pixar movies stand out as the best? Today we are talking the best and worst from one of my favorite studios, and let's get into it. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. In honor of Lightyear, we're taking all the Pixar movies, just the movies at this point, and ranking them in tier list form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the films, I'm going to put them on a tier, tell you why, and then at the end of the video, we are going to rank them. But I need you all in those comments down below letting me know which Pixar movie deserves to be on what tier, what's your top 5, top 10, and is there a film that goes on that ever so coveted F tier? That's where we don't want to be. By the way, if you're here and you like these tier lists, let me know down below. There is a tier list playlist on my channel, and we're going to be updating that Marvel tier list very soon. But as of now, let's talk about Pixar and start with one of my favorite franchises in the movie space, right? I still haven't watched, I know, the Monsters, Inc. television show spinoff on Disney+. I need to get to that. I've heard sweet things, but not a ton. It got renewed for season 2. But it all started with that first film. Mike and Sully, their relationship, the voice cast, and bringing in Billy Crystal and John Goodman to play these characters, right? It's an iffy thing to do because we've seen John Goodman in animated form before. We've seen movies like this where we take monsters, we try to make them good, we try to make them relatable, but this time around you're adding that Pixar spin. You have the little girl in Boo, you have incredible villainous performances, and awesome voice cast surrounding our main two characters, and animation at the time that wasn't game-changing, but it was really, really good. It's the perfect combination for a classic animated movie. But for me, it goes a step further than that. It takes it into this emotional territory that I never expected for an animated film at that age, and it resonated with me. Now, I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, so this could be part of that and part of why I make this decision, but I am putting this on the S tier. We're starting out really strong. That's what the S means, strong. No. You know what? I'm looking at that S tier. It's a great tier to be on, but I want to take Monsters, Inc. one step further because for me, it is an all-time film. So we're going to create a new tier. We're going to title it the all-time tier, and we're going to take that one notch up because there are a handful of Pixar films that are on my all-time list. Some of my favorites ever, and Monsters, Inc. makes that list. Then we come to the sequel, and it's Monsters University, the film that goes back in time and focuses on Mike and Sully, how they came to be, how they became the characters that we know in the first film. You're adding new voice talent. I believe John Krasinski is a voice in this movie, and they play on a lot of those college tropes that we see immensely in movies like this that, you know, at times work in this movie. But I felt like Monsters University did not have the same level of charm as the first Monsters, Inc. film. I really wanted to love it walking out. Instead, I said, you know what? That was fun. I thought some of the humor tiptoed on, it's going to appeal to kids, it's going to appeal to adults. It does very much appeal to people that are either in, have been to, or are on the verge of going to college, so that is much appreciated. Some of the new characters are really entertaining, but I believe the charm and magic of having a character like Boo in that first movie, but also, you know, having these characters make decisions that are a bit ridiculous at times, and the story itself, it's just not as there as the first story, and that's part of my hesitation with the TV show as well. I'm like, I didn't love Monsters University as much, so I'm not as enthused about this. There is enough fun to warrant a movie that I believe belongs on the C tier. Again, the C tier is not a bad one to be on. These are movies that I believe are okay, but they just don't resonate with me like the other Pixar films. All right, now we have the Cars franchise. This should have been a franchise that I have so much nostalgia for, and I kind of do for the first film. It was like that right age of hitting me when I was growing up. You have this new animated movie with an array of characters, a very interesting world where cars can talk. How does that work? What's the science behind this film? Those theory videos online are hilarious, but we're focused on these characters and yet again, a voice cast that is just plain awesome. Owen Wilson bringing in racing legends to be stars, technically stars in all three of the films because each one has like a major guest star. Say what you will about Larry the Cable Guy, but I thought his presence was warranted in that first movie. Definitely falls off in the sequel, and we'll get to that. But that relationship with he and Lightning McQueen, the dynamic that they have and kind of that banter, the comedy working back and forth off of each other, in my opinion, it works really well. Look, this is a standard story. It's not like we're seeing something that we haven't seen before. The final race is thoroughly entertaining, and kind of that Rocky-style build-up to that race worked extremely well. Cars is what it is, and it never does anything more. But I think that's okay, and I see why so many people love it, especially if you grew up with the first movie. So I'm actually going to put Cars on the B tier. And then we get into the sequel, this spy movie that shifts Mater into the focus, and one that, for what it is, I think it's going to be enjoyable for kids. But if you enjoyed the first film and you were looking forward to a proper Cars sequel, this does not feel like that. This feels like a made-for-TV Disney movie. You know when Disney would do those kind of like off-base, off-brand sequels back in the day and they'd put them on VHS? Well, that's what this is, but for Pixar. And I'm not including planes and trains and automobiles and whatever those other ones are, because I think those were just Disney. Pixar made Cars 2 and put it in theaters. Listen, I love my cocaine, all right? He's the best. Why did this turn into a spy franchise? Why? It's so random. Why was this trying to be like Mission Impossible for Cars or, 007? I don't know what this movie's trying to be. But to put Mater at the forefront as the focus, I get it. Fish out of water, classic comedy, haha humor. Did not work for me. Did not make me laugh. That being said, I'm not putting it on the F tier because the F tier is reserved for like the dumpster fire films, and I don't think Pixar has really ever had one of those spoilers for my list. But Cars 2 does go on the E tier. Forgettable, not good in any way, and it's just for kids. And who knows, maybe they won't enjoy it. Now we have Cars 3 with a little bit of a new voice cast. You're bringing in characters like Cruz and Smokey, voice actors like Cristela Alonso and Chris Cooper, Nathan Fillion, but you're bringing back Owen Wilson, Larry the Cable Guy, and our classic characters. I honestly forgot Tony Shalhoub played Luigi in this franchise, but it's a great group, and we're finally getting back to what I believe a sequel should have been in the first place, focusing on the races. Lightning McQueen, it's only taken 3 films, but he's kind of washed up. He's not the guy any longer, and he's trying to regain that speed. I am speed. Ka-chow. Well, his ka-chow is gone, and it turns into, if you compare the first movie to Rocky, this is kind of like the Creed. I don't think it's on that level, obviously, compared to the first film, but it does kind of rebound and recover on what the second movie did. Look, it wasn't as epic as that first trailer. That first trailer for Cars 3 was like, oh my God, this is going to be dark. And it wasn't that, right? It stuck with some of the humor that I'm just like, about the whole franchise. But I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the journey. It's very cliche. You see exactly where it's going. But at the end of the day, Cars 3 did manage to recover just a little bit compared to the second one, and that's why I put it on the C tier. I think it's a solid, passable film from Pixar, even though you want more than passable. Next up, we have Finding Nemo, a movie, a franchise that as a kid, over and over and over. My wife, honestly, she's like, I'm sick of Finding Nemo. We watched it every day for 3 years because of my sister. I get that, but I don't think I could ever see myself getting sick of Finding Nemo. It's a wonderful film. You have those movies that are on loop as a kid, and I've had some bad movies on loop as a kid, even though I have nostalgia for them. Finding Nemo holds up to this day. Every single moment. My God, Marlin loses it all, doesn't he? Every single kid except for one. So you don't blame him when he goes overboard and setting out on this journey with a wonderful side character. If Pixar gets anything right, it's side characters. We just talked about Mater. Stay a side character. Now we have Dory. Maybe she should have stayed a side character, but she's great in the role. Ellen crushes it, the entirety of the voice cast. And then you have all of our side characters, Bruce the shark and our adventure with our turtles. I mean, every single supporting character has a role. And then what Nemo has to go through in the fish tank, Willem Dafoe's character, it all culminates and comes together so beautifully. Finding Nemo is the definition of a beautiful animated movie. The ocean setting is wonderful. I'm going the all-time tier. This is easily 100% an all-timer for me. Finding Dory, look, I was disappointed with this sequel because with every Pixar, bringing it back into the consciousness, making a ton of money, you want it to live up to the first movie, and most of the time, they don't. Some of the times they do, but I don't think Finding Dory was one of those movies. Now, does that mean it's bad? No, I actually think this is a really compelling journey with great side characters for the first two acts. I do believe the third act of Finding Dory does somewhat fall off, and it's not nearly as compelling as it was setting up to be. Dory's journey and, finding herself through her memory loss, that's a really tough thing to cope with, and the fallout of Finding Nemo is felt absolutely. Marlin and Nemo and some of our side characters that we re-encounter, but introducing new characters, and this theme park setting is really cool. I love those moments and a couple of the really good gags that continue throughout the film. It's just when it all starts to wrap up in that third act, whereas Finding Nemo nailed the third act, Finding Dory, it somewhat falls flat and takes away from what the first two acts gave us. That being said, I could see this generation watching it and having that same feeling for it as we did about Finding Nemo, because it does also appeal to adults, which is really, really nice. So I'm going to throw Finding Dory on the B tier, maybe lower B tier, but I still really enjoy it. I think it's a good film. All right, now we're going to cover some of the individual movies for Pixar, starting with A Bug's Life, one of the movies that started it all. You always have the conversation, Team Bug's Life, Team Ants. I'm actually Team Bug's Life. I think this is a really fun, quirky, silly movie with a great villain. Hopper is such an awesome villain. His presence is terrifying. And then you have the birds that are swooping around. They're even more terrifying. To see this microscopic world and how everything's playing out, from the circus and the circus gang to our main character, and just kind of trying to figure things out and having help along the way with his crew, bringing that circus into town, impressing the grasshoppers. Such a fun premise. It's a little conventional, it's a little familiar, maybe not at the time, but watching it back today, I'm like, all right, I've seen movies that operate in this way and do it better. And of course, the animation's not the best, but at the time, it was phenomenal. So I think A Bug's Life is a good movie. I'm going to put it on the B tier. If you had the chance to change your fate, would you do it? Do it. Do it. I can't do it. This movie's kind of crazy, man. You have this curse, and obviously what comes from that, our main character and Merida, and a nice voice cast overall. I really like Billy Connolly, Emma Thompson, obviously Kelly MacDonald as the main character, and there are a lot of really nice, fantastical elements at play. It has this nice fantasy feel, but also a period piece, but also some humor that doesn't quite go with what the stakes are in this movie, because if you think about it, the stakes are really, really high. Like, lives are literally at stake, and then you have some of these comedic moments that, whereas other Pixar movies, I believe they have a better balance, this doesn't quite work as well, and there are also some scenes in this movie, like in the second act, where I'm just kind of losing interest, and maybe this is a me thing, just not being as invested in the story as other people. I understand Brave is a beloved Pixar movie, but I just watch it, and I think it's solid. It doesn't really feel as Pixar-y as it needs to, but it's one that I understand why people love. So I'm going to throw Brave on the C tier. I think it's okay. All right, let's get to the good stuff. Inside Out, a film that came out and kind of blew everyone away. Not only is the voice cast just like top tier, Lewis Black, Mindy Kaling, Bill Hader, Amy Poehler, Phyllis Smith, Richard Kind, as Bing Bong, and that moment with Bing Bong is still one of the best moments of any anime. I mean, come on, y'all. How do you not love Inside Out? Getting to see the emotions of these kids on full display, and you have that compelling story happening in everyday life, so you're getting a taste, a feel of that. But then we're going into the minds of our kids, the minds of our characters, and exploring how these feelings are interacting with each other and the emotions within the emotions. there you go. Conflictions there. Obviously, where is this going to go? Like, how is this story going to come together? Because it's such an insane concept, but it does. I love Pete Docter. I think Pete Docter is one of the best animation directors ever. And the fact that he, and I believe he helped write the story as well, and all of the animators and writers were able to bring this together is so thoroughly impressive. Is it one that feels maybe as nostalgic for me as some of these other Pixar movies? Not necessarily. It's also, oddly enough, not a film that I go back to as often as I feel like I should, so there is some sort of hesitation there, but I'm looking for nitpicks at this point because Inside Out is really, truly incredible, and it is going on the S tier for me. Top tier animation from Pixar. The Good Dinosaur. This is one of those films that I understand a lot of people just flat out don't like. If this wasn't a Pixar movie and it wasn't being held to those Pixar standards, I feel as if this would have come out, people would have been like, that was sweet. And that is, I guess, a lot of the response. But there are some people that absolutely just like despise it because it's not top tier animation, other than the actual backgrounds and the landscapes in this movie, which I believe are some of the best and most beautiful looking shots we've ever seen from an animated movie in general. That's right, I said it. Now, the characters themselves, they look a little cartoony. They're not as maybe well fleshed out as they could have been, but I think that was the intentions of the film, just give us this little quirky adventure. And when you look at the cast, like Frances McDormand, Jeffrey Wright, the cast is really, really good. But we're flipping, we're switching roles here. The dinosaur is the master, the human is the animal, the dinosaur's son is trying to prove things to his father, and it's conventional. We've seen it before. Nothing revolutionary about this story. And honestly, it's a slightly forgettable film. But every time I watch it, I'm like, it's cute. I think kids would enjoy this. And sometimes that's the goal. And it slightly appeals to adults. So I'm actually going to go The Good Dinosaur on the C tier. I think it's a sweet film, just not revolutionary. Ratatouille, or if you've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, Ratatouille. No, it's Ratatouille. Listen, I think this movie, when it came out, I said, and I was younger, right? But I said, this looks silly. What? I just said raccoon. A rat that teaches a human how to cook by controlling his hair. You're going to let mice in a rest? That's the dumbest. And Pixar, they put this movie out and they say, Austin, shut your mouth. Watch the movie. And that's what I did. I shut my mouth. I watched the film. Brad Bird is the director here, right? We always think of Brad Bird, Incredibles, or even Brad Bird, Mission Impossible. We forget Brad Bird did Ratatouille, and he crushed it. He knocked it out of the park. The soundtrack, the score is amazing. The voice cast, Patton Oswalt, still one of my favorite performances from Pixar ever. Even Brad Garrett, even Lou Romano, like everybody is so freaking good in this film. We forget Peter Son, who's in Lightyear. He was in this movie, Peter O'Toole. So you have the cast, you have that sweet factor, even though you got to get past the whole mouse thing. But once you get into that relationship between he and this chef who just can't figure things out and doesn't know what to do, and all of a sudden, it's working. But we have to keep this secret. We can't let anyone know. The food critic, the other chefs, everybody has to be on the out while we are on the inside, but you have the landscapes and you have the setting and you have the music. I think Ratatouille is easily one of the best Pixar films, and oh my God, it's S tier. So here's what I'll say about Up. After that incredible montage, and you know the one I'm talking about, the movie is not as good. But what is as good as that opening montage? It is genuinely one of the most heartfelt things I've ever seen. If that was the short film, just that right there, that would be the greatest short film of all time. Like, the opening of this movie, and we all know this, it's an easy take. You know, I'm not doing any hot take here. It's easy. Yeah, it's incredible. But what about the rest of the movie? I think the rest of the movie is super entertaining. You have the relationship between this older gentleman and this kid. And the kid, you know, he's slightly annoying, but he's doing what kids do. You understand that there is this connection there. Obviously the dog, Doug, and obviously the big creature, the feather creature. And I go, Christopher Plummer is great as Charles Muntz, but it's Ed Asner. It's his show. He steals it every step of the way from top to bottom. Pete Docter, once again, is our director. I will say the journey itself is filled with maybe more cliches than you would want from a top-tier Pixar movie, once we hit that third act especially. And the mission itself does get a little silly with all the dogs, but that's part of the cute factor of Pixar. I don't mind it as much, and it resonated so much with kids. Up, we know exactly where this is going. It's going on the S tier. I don't know if I feel as strongly about it as some of the other S tier movies, but come on, man. It's a beautiful film. WALL-E is a game-changing sci-fi movie. I truly believe that to this day. And I wasn't really on board when I first watched the film. I walked in, watched WALL-E, and said, it's a really good animated movie, but it's not game-changing. Now, granted, I was younger. I keep saying that. But now I watch WALL-E and I'm like, this is like, there's so many things here, like parallels. I think the romance is moving, right? You have this romance between these two robots, one that's super high-tech and advanced, the other who just walks around or rolls around and cleans up trash. But he watches these movies and he understands what romance can be, but then the world surrounding these robots, this post-apocalyptic landscape, what happened to the Earth under that regime, and what's going on now, and how do we get back to that, right? So it's not only a movie about WALL-E, it's a movie about us. It's a movie about people. It goes beyond what you expect, and the sci-fi elements are so cool. The moments in space are so much fun. The side character robots are entertaining. WALL-E has all of the makings for an S-tier movie, and I think it brings it home. So I'm putting WALL-E not on the E tier. I just thought about Coco and I got sad. Not because the movie is bad, but because it is rad. I didn't intend on rhyming, but I have really good timing. Stop it. The cast, Anthony Gonzalez as Miguel, Benjamin Bratt as Ernesto de la Cruz, but also really compelling characters like Hector is one of those characters that I go back to so often in my head, like, oh my God, I didn't expect the turn at the beginning. Now, as you progress through the film, you can kind of see a few things coming. Like, it's a slightly predictable Pixar film, but that and the occasional joke that maybe veers too much for kids. I mean, it's a kid's movie, though. It's a movie for families, and adults are going to enjoy it. Kids are going to love it. I'm trying to find nitpicks with a film that has aged so beautifully. It may be too early to say. I mean, it came out in 2017. Coco is one of those, like a Finding Nemo, like an Inside Out, like a WALL-E, that we're already looking back on and saying that's a Pixar classic. And it is. It felt elevated above some of the other movies coming out at the time. It felt like it was just a step up from what maybe some of these other movies weren't doing, utilizing music, utilizing Day of the Dead. And I get it, some people are going to say, well, it's a ripoff of this other movie. I don't think it is. I think it's a vastly different film. It's a different journey, different adventure. Some of the most gorgeous animated landscapes I've ever seen. I'm going to put Coco not on the S tier. I think I'm going to put it on the all-time tier. I'm feeling so strongly about this movie. The more I watch it, the more I absolutely love it. Mama Coco. Onward, a fantastical adventure, and obviously people were saying it reminds me, what was that Will Smith Netflix movie? It's that kind of like, yeah, we've seen this premise before, clearly, but it's Pixar, so let's see what they do with it. Well, we've seen too much Chris Pratt and Tom Holland, and yeah, but they're good in the roles. It's like there are so many things going into this film that do give you some sort of payoff while you're watching, and I actually had a really good time with this movie. Now, that being said, I am a sucker for a good brotherly story, and this journey to essentially find their dad and get one moment with their father after the tragedies of their past. That's really compelling. Like, it's a truly beautiful moment, and we get that moment at the end, an unexpected moment. Like, you know exactly where the movie's going to go and how it's going to play out until it happens, and I'm like, whoa, didn't expect that much of a gut punch. Now, the journey itself is a little more cliche than it needs to be. The police officer storyline and all of that coming together and the car chase and this and that. It's fun, right? You're entertained. You're enjoying watching it. but it's nothing revolutionary. But I don't think Onward had to be revolutionary. Like, it didn't have to be Inside Out or Ratatouille or Up. It just had to be really entertaining with a crazy emotional payoff. And I got all of those things. I thought Holland and Pratt did a great job. And again, give me with that brotherly story, man. I'm putting Onward on the A tier. I think it did exactly what it needed to do, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Luca, you have a young boy who is a sea monster. It's a secret. They're keeping it from everyone, including all of the people in their town. And this is one of those animated films that we all expected so much from when we saw that first trailer. We're like, oh my God, it's going to be the next Pixar classic. I can't quite put it on that category. I can't say it's on the level of all of the movies on the S tier. But as simple as it is, I did really care about this relationship. I really did. And I thought there were so many things about Luca that threw me back into my childhood. Not that I could relate to the specific circumstances, but just their thoughts and feelings as kids and wanting to get out from underneath of his parents and saying, I know I can do this. And the goal, the mission at hand here is so funny, but I believe that I am more than just what you believe I'm capable to be, but you also stand by his parents thinking to yourselves, yeah, they're just trying to protect their son. Again, themes we've explored before, but the voice cast, Jacob Tremblay, Jack Dylan Grazer, I thought Emma Berman, her character was just so wonderful. I wish she would have been utilized more than she was. Yeah, the bully character, a little cliche and overboard, but once you get to that final scene with the train, it was so wonderfully constructed, and it led me to really enjoy Luca, so I'm going to put Luca on the A tier. The next film is Soul, Pixar's Soul, which did, in fact, blow me away. I thought this movie was just so well done. It really reminded me of Inside Out. Like, I'm watching this thinking, yeah, it's more about this existential life and death, heaven and hell, mid-region type of thing, and it's freaky in that way. But at the same time, whenever we're in that world, and I honestly wish the whole movie would have taken, or most of it, place in that world, I was enamored, I was in awe, I was transfixed. I thought visually it was spectacular. For me, it's the storytelling here. Let's see who the director is. Oh, Pete Docter. Maestro. He's brilliant, right? But the score of this is one of the best scores I've ever heard in an animated movie. I'm ready to say that. The score is wonderful. There were some elements about the story when we're in the human world with, say, the cat and, how we switch things up there. That story point, unexpected, but oftentimes in these Pixar movies, we'll get a moment or two that just veers really far towards kids. Sometimes it loses those adults, but we have to remember these are family movies, so they almost have to have those moments to work. So I was actually okay with that, even though it was a little cliche and predictable. When we get back to what I loved about the first half of the film, I was back on board. I thought Soul was absolutely wonderful. Jamie Foxx crushed it in this role, and I thought the entirety of the voice cast, from Graham Norton to Tina Fey to Questlove, I'm going to put Soul on the S tier. S is for Soul. That's a thing. Incredibles, I don't have to say much. I've raved about this movie my entire life. I grew up with it. It holds every bit of nostalgia for me. I think it is the perfect animated superhero family film. Yes, that's a very specific category of movies, but when you look at everything that this movie had to do, it did it. The only thing about it that I can knock is a bit of a predictable turn. You know exactly who Syndrome is going to be when he's a kid. All right, I saw that coming. But it's not about that. It's not about how predictable certain elements are, and we know kind of where it's going. It's the dynamics between the family members. It's the voice cast in this movie. Everyone plays their character to a T, and the score mixed with the visuals at the time, mixed with almost perfecting a Fantastic Four movie when they still haven't perfected a Fantastic Four movie. And Brad Bird's direction makes it one of the more compelling superhero stories. And the action is great, right? We forget how good the action is just because the movie itself is awesome. The Incredibles, nothing will surpass this in terms of Pixar attempting a superhero movie again. And really, Spider-Verse is the only animated superhero film that will ever compete, in my opinion. So I'm going all-time tier for The Incredibles. There's just not much more I can say. This may be one of my hottest takes of the video. I actually believe The Incredibles 2 is a fantastic film. I really do. And it partially could be my nostalgia for the first movie. I don't know. The fact that they're picking up right after the first one ends off, and they're giving us character development galore with these characters. Switching things up, Elastigirl, she gets to go out and be the hero, even though Mr. Incredible in the first movie, that's all he wanted to be. But now he's home with the kids, trying to keep the kids in check. You had the hilarious moments with Jack, and those are all fine and great, and those are those moments that appeal to kids. But it's a very dark movie that remains dark throughout, right? I thought some of the side superheroes, they looked a little silly in the third act, and some of the power sets were kind of overly ridiculous, maybe gearing more towards the younger audience than I wanted. But the final moments on the cruise ship, and really this villain in general, is a great villain. The twist you can kind of see coming, kind of like the first movie. It's something they've never managed to master in these two films, is giving us something totally unexpected. But beyond that, I saw the motivations for those characters, and you get Bob Odenkirk to be in the movie. Come on, man. The voice cast is great. This is some of the coolest animation I've ever seen. The sequences are super trippy. I wasn't as satisfied as I was with the first film. It'll never reach those marks, but you know what? Screw it. I'm putting The Incredibles 2 on the S tier, and I don't care who knows it. You all know it. Yeah. Next up, one of the brand new 2022 Pixar movies, a movie that was somewhat hit with some controversy. I know some people didn't love it, and the scores were kind of mixed with audiences, but others loved it, and loved it so much, like was able to resonate with our main character, this 13-year-old girl who grew up in the early 2000s, and that's what really resonated with me, especially the first time I watched it. That hit me so hard. The boy band craze, I'm like, yeah, I remember that. NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, we all had our little CD players and listened to them. Come on now. And I actually really like the lore with the panda here. I think it's interesting, even going as far as some of the metaphors. I believe they do represent and go for and hit what they're supposed to do in that third act. My issue with the movie, though, was in the first act of the film, the mother, and I understand she's supposed to be overbearing, that's the point of the character, and you have the reasons why given to us at the end, but it came across as a little too much for me, and our character and characters in general, they just didn't feel maybe as realistic and as grounded as what the story itself was going for, and I wasn't as attached to that story, especially the second time I went back and watched it. I'm like, it gave me so many problems the first time watching it. And the second time watching it, I found more problems with the first act and really going into the second act of this film. Now, when it turns around and we get into the lore of the panda, it was entertaining. It was fun. But even then, I wasn't as enamored with this movie as I wanted to be. I love the anime inclusions and the different styles of animation and trying to do something different. We're getting more of that these days, and I think it's fantastic. And I thought the direction was solid. The animation was really good. There's something about this story and just the familiarity of it all that just didn't hit me as well. And I have a lot of peers who absolutely loved Turning Red, and I understand why. I think those things are great. I just don't know if the story is as strong with this film. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, it's kind of dampering my love and enthusiasm for the animation. So I'm still going C tier with Turning Red, but I do believe it's one of the lower Pixar films. And finally, oh man, this is, I'm sleepy. We have the Toy Story franchise. This is the franchise that means the absolute world to me, I guess along with The Incredibles, but there's something about going back and revisiting these movies and living my childhood like over again as I'm watching them, especially the first three. They just mean so much to me, and when they leave Andy that final time, or when Andy leaves them that final time, everything is just put into place almost perfectly. So we're going to start with the first film and just everything about it, exactly what it needs to be. The relationship between Woody and Buzz is one of the greatest camaraderies of all time. We know that now, even though they definitely had to get past their differences, but it's the supporting cast. It's giving us a bad human in Sid 1 that they have to be terrified of, that they end up in the grasp of by the end of the film, but it's a race at the end of the movie to get back to Andy that is just heart-pounding, like as a child, soul-crushing, knowing that they may not make it back and that the other toys have turned against Woody because they thought Woody turned against Buzz. And there's so many things about this story. It's the perfect animated film, and Toy Story absolutely goes on that all-time tier. Next up, Toy Story 2, and one that I do believe is a ever so slight step back from Toy Story. Not really. It's still a phenomenal movie, a phenomenally made movie, and I love it with everything in me. I wasn't as into Al's Toy Barn. I wasn't as into that third act where they're escaping as maybe I should have been rewatching this as an adult, but it doesn't matter because everything else about the movie is wonderful. Buzz's journey, Woody's journey, realizing that there's more than meets the eye, and Woody's roundup, that entire thing, and really Jesse's story, Stinky. I could go on for days. Toy Story 2 is an awesome, awesome film, and that's why it goes on the S tier. Is it all time? The franchise is. It gets very close. I'll say that much. Toy Story 3. Oh my God, they brought it home. They nailed it. Like, they capped off this trilogy in a way that I never, in a million years, anticipated them to. They gave us a compelling journey. They did some things with these characters, right? Andy's older. He's going off to college. He's outgrown these toys, but not really, right? He still feels something for them. They obviously feel so much for him. And that hit me so hard because I'm like in the same place or a similar place as Andy was, getting close to that spot watching this movie, and I'm thinking, this is everything to me. It means everything to so many people, but the fear that these toys weren't going to make it at the end of the movie, and knowing that they would not end up with Andy was heartbreaking. It was tragic, and everything about what they did with these characters, I thought worked extremely well. Toy Story 3 goes on the all-time tier. Toy Story 4. There are things about Toy Story 4 that I absolutely love. I think the animation is gorgeous. I think the supporting characters, the new characters, are fun. They're entertaining. Yes, another toy gets lost. It's a similar journey. We have a villain in Gabby who is somewhat familiar to other villains we've seen in the franchise. Different setting, a different set of characters almost in its entirety. But this time around, you have Woody as the clear focus and maybe as the only focus throughout most of the movie. And it's kind of about his relationship with Bo Peep. You're changing up Bo Peep as a character. Getting back to her was a wonderful thing to see. And that relationship carried me through the film. I thought it was beautifully done, beautifully constructed. And I loved the way that they played it out. That being said, I thought the other side of the story, specifically Buzz, is something that sort of rubbed me the wrong way this time around. They made Buzz a lot dumber than he was. And I understand he's never been the clear cut, like, oh yeah, he's that character, he's going to figure everything out. No, but why did they make him like they made him in this movie? It's really my only major flaw, because I know a lot of people give the film a hard time for, separating Woody from the gang and stuff. That arc didn't bother me because it felt natural. It felt like the authentic ending to that story. But again, you're doing some things to some characters here that I just wasn't fully on board for. I love the addition of someone like Forky. I thought that character was really, really funny. I just, it's caused me to lower my enthusiasm over the years. I still think it's a really great movie. Separated from the trilogy, it doesn't reach the heights of the trilogy for me, so it's definitely the worst of the four. But like I said before, you start playing the comparison game, you're going to hurt yourself. And a lot of people with that nostalgia are going to look down on this movie. Understandably so, but I take it for what it is. I think Toy Story 4 is on the A tier. Oh, you have Lightyear. Buzz Lightyear to the rescue. Not Tim Allen. It's played by Chris Evans. And we're not going to spoil anything here, but that didn't really bother me just because that opening shot of the movie tells you all you need to know. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Now, this is a film that, again, people have nostalgia for something, right? And they hold it so close to their heart. So when you slightly tweak that, or even those who love something like a Buzz Lightyear and Star Command, which I did, I thought it was fantastic, it does rub people the wrong way. And again, I get it. I have nostalgia for the first three Toy Stories. They mean the world to me. But I was up for this movie. Like, I was okay with it as long as it was what it was, and it was that. Is that confusing? Probably. And here's what I said with my review. This is everything a Buzz Lightyear film could have been. Like, I don't know how they could have done really anything different. Like, it made sense from start to finish what this character is, who he was, and I love, nobody's talking about this, I love the fact that he was so determined to finish the mission. It was this belief that was instilled in him, and they showcased that so well. And that dynamic with his partner, how that plays out throughout the first half, that interstellar type storyline, I thought was beautiful. Now, you're going to go on IMDb, and it's already been review bombed. I expected it. I walked out of the theater. I said that they're going to review bomb it, and they have. So that's fine. But some of the complaints that I don't think people have actually watched the movie, some of the complaints have said it's just a standard, typical anime film. And I don't think that's the case, right? I think they give Buzz's character a lot to do and a lot to say. And so much so that it kind of makes up for that Toy Story 4 of not giving Buzz his just desserts or his due. And they really do give Buzz that in this film. And that was so beautiful for me. Now, the new crew, when everything happens and we end up with, I thought the squad was good. I like Keke Palmer. I thought Taika was he wasn't as good as I wanted him to be. Socks, MVP, steals the show, steals the movie. And the animation is gorgeous. I enjoyed Zurg's storyline. I thought they gave him an interesting twist that I maybe wasn't anticipating. And even though it plays out in somewhat of a standard, familiar sci-fi superhero way, it does feel as if it did all it needed to do to be a solid Buzz Lightyear story. And so for all of those reasons, I am going to put Lightyear on that A tier. Didn't go that extra mile for sure, some cliches, but that's the tier I'm going with. All right, let's rank these movies before I stroke out. At the bottom, are you surprised that Cars 2 is there? Because I'm not. Let's move into the C tier and unfortunately put the Good Dinosaur in that spot. Next up is Cars 3, a slight step up, and Brave, which is a movie that I guess I've moved tiny bit up this tier over the years. I'm going to go ahead and put Turning Red in this next spot, followed by Monsters University, which is at the top of the C tier for me. On that B tier, I think you have three pretty solid films, but Finding Dory will be at the bottom of that tier. Next up, let's go. This one's actually tough, but let's go Cars. Because A Bug's Life, it's kind of one of the OGs of Pixar. This one's kind of tough, but I'm going to go Onward at the bottom, followed by Luca. Walking out of the theater, I think I said I'd rather revisit Lightyear, but thinking about it just a bit more, I'm still going to go with Toy Story 4, just a very well-made animated film. So we're going to move into that S tier, and this is where it gets so freaking complicated. But at the bottom, we're going to go Incredibles 2, just not on the level of something like, oh, this is going to hurt people. Up. Yep. Up is my next one. I'm sorry, everybody. Followed by, oh, this one hurts too, Ratatouille. I don't like putting these movies this low. This is physically tearing me apart. Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious. I'm stumped. Okay, I think I'm going to keep Toy Story 2 there, and I'm going to follow it up with Inside Out, even though every decision I'm making is hurting my soul. I say Soul. I think I'm going to put Soul there, and then WALL-E. Oh, it hurts. WALL-E's such a crazy movie to have at the top of the S tier, but it just is that movie for me, man. You know what? Hey, if you're still here and you didn't tune out by now, I'm going to go back to that A tier, and I'm going to pivot on something. The more I think about it, the more I feel uncomfortable with putting Lightyear above Luca, so I'm actually going to go Luca over Lightyear. I just think the joy from that story is a little more creative than Lightyear, but nothing changes with my thoughts on those two films. All right, let's get into that all-time tier, and let's figure this thing out. At the bottom, I'm still going to go Coco, even though it is so close to Monsters, Inc., which firmly fits in that number 5 spot. At number 4, we're going to go Finding Nemo. Absolutely phenomenal film. Now, here's where it gets so tough for me. I think I'm going to keep Toy Story 3, even though it may even be a better made movie than Toy Story, right in that 3 spot. And for the longest time, I've had The Incredibles at the top. And they're literally back-to-back in my all-time favorites list. I'm going to try something new this time around and just see how it feels to put Toy Story in that number 1 spot. I mean, they're neck and neck. It's like, Austin, which kid do you love more? I don't have kids. I always use that analogy. I'm just going to try it. We're going to see how it feels. Kind of like the mustache. I'm just seeing how it feels. All right. Doesn't work? We'll go back. But that's my list. And I am so tired. This is going to be the longest video I've ever done. Doesn't matter. It's Pixar Tier List. That's what we're here for. It's a lot of movies to talk about, but I thank you guys so much for being here. Hey, if you want to drop that thumbs up, it would help me out a lot. If you want to come back for more tier lists, that would help me out even more. If you're not a subscriber, you should do it. Unless you don't want to, but you should. I'm tired. I need water. I'll see you soon.